on Leadership with Purpose, the 2021 Corporate Mandate to Activate Talent. I'm Katie Lewis, and I'm COO at Rainmaking and co-founder of Aspire, and I have the honour of facilitating today's session. So very shortly, I'm going to be asking our panellists to introduce themselves. Then we'll move into a 30 to 40 minute discussion. And finally, we will open the floor to questions from our attendees. So I invite you all to be taking notes, and if burning questions come up, please do jot those down so we can come back to them later. All right, wonderful. So I'm going to now hand over to Raja, if you would like to first introduce yourself.
Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Raja AlMazrouei, Executive Vice President of DIFC FinTech Hive, the first and largest FinTech accelerator in the region. And today I am excited to join the conversation with our partners from Rainmaking to look at the opportunity of upskilling.
Craig, it's gone again.
In the region as we prepare for the new era through digital transformation. I think I should hand over to Lars.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you, Raja.
Thank you, Raja. And sitting not far from Raja physically, also in DIFC, my name is Lars Buch, and I'm heading Rainmaking and Startup Bootcamp in MENA Russia. One could argue that I have a little bit of experience with the Aspire concept, since I was one of the persons closing down Nokia back in the days, and trying to turn that into a positive experience for both the company and the employees.
Fantastic, thank you, Lars. And we do have a third panelist who is set to be joining us today, Michelle. You might have noticed if you joined the call earlier, or she's having some technical issues. So we will turn to her best we can. Michelle, can we take this moment for you just to introduce yourself?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
if you duck and dive back in, we can know who you are and where you're coming
Super.
from.
I'm so sorry. We seem to be having some internet challenges. So hi, everybody. Michelle Roborg-Sondergaard. I'm Copenhagen based and South African by birth, but living in Copenhagen at the moment, and currently VP for HR across Western Europe region for Carlsburg. I've worked across a spectrum of industries and over 30 years in the business, and I think I've lost myself there.
We've still got you if you can. Oh, no. We have lost Michelle. Okay, so we will continue to move on. But I think when Michelle was able to join us, her experience of working across HR in large organizations, most recently as VP of HR at Carlsburg, brings a really great point of view to this discussion. So I hope we can have her join us. She's worked with talent as they've come into businesses, engaged through their journey and working with the corporate, and then also importantly on exit, which is something we hopefully will have the opportunity to discuss today. Michelle, we've got you here again. We've just done a quick introduction to you, so I'm just going to move on now into the next phase of it, and really would like to now set the context for our discussion today. Oh, Michelle, we might just need you to put yourself on mute. Yeah, perfect, thank you. So, right, into the context setting of our discussion today, and it's something that I've been particularly close to with the work that we've been doing with Aspire, where we've been recognising the enormity of changes that are ahead for businesses and individuals. And with Aspire, our purpose is to provide organisations with a learn by doing programme, enabling them to leverage the skills and speed of startup thinking across the business at scale to help with these challenging times, that we're all facing. I'm sure everyone on the session today is not unaware of the fact that the pandemic has dramatically accelerated and changed whole industries. And I think importantly for this discussion, that's had an impact on the skills that are required for businesses to succeed. So the World Economic Forum tells us that the double disruption caused by automation and the pandemic is likely to displace 85 million jobs by 2025, in 5 years' time. And also within this same time frame, those that are remaining in roles, around 50% of those are going to require a level of upskilling and reskilling. So this is an absolutely mission critical time for leaders, not only to step up to the challenge of reskilling, but to do so in a way that demonstrates a care and purpose. So if we were to link this together, we also know that brands with purpose and that are set on kind of improving the quality of life and driving impact outperform on the stock market by 120%. So this is something that we've been discussing quite a lot. And while I've got Michelle here, I'm now going to sort of turn to her because we've been talking, particularly Michelle, about how companies can support their employees and their talent, not only when they're onboarding the people into the business, supporting them through that transition. And now what we're seeing in these changing times is this impact of when people are leaving the company. So my question to you, Michelle, and to our other panelists is, how do you see this as being appropriate and mission critical for all organizations? And what are you seeing out there that's sort of some best practice around how companies are, leading with care, leading with purpose at this time?
So Katie, I'm going to jump in while I can. I'm so sorry. I'm really having problems with my internet. There's no doubt, I think the entire employee experience life cycle is critical these days. It's become so much more prevalent. And it's not just about the pre-boarding and the onboarding, it's definitely the full experience for an employee. It has reputational impact, it's really critical. And I think organizations today, as we've had to do and adapt with the pandemic and shifting the whole concept of leadership with care as well. Sorry, leadership with care. Am I there?
Yes, we've got you, Michelle, yes.
I'm still back. I think leadership with care, but also the future of work, all the stats you're showing, companies do need to look at how they are offboarding or where their employees are going to be in 2025, or where, with the impact of COVID, people are losing roles. They don't have necessarily opportunity to find jobs outside. So for me, I think it's a corporate citizen responsibility. All companies need to be looking at how do they enable their employees to be able to either continue working, that would be upskilling and reskilling, or otherwise. Sorry, am I back? So upskilling, reskilling, but also the outskilling, which is about saying, what can we do to help our employees who may be made redundant, who may not have jobs? And I do think it's an area maybe HR haven't looked at as much as we used to, or as much as we look at the front end. But that back end part, when we're terminating employees, we often have pushed it out to outplacement and left it in the outplacement's hands. And that's not the solution necessarily to help people, because outplacement's got a very valuable role, but it doesn't necessarily change skills. It doesn't upskill your employees. Yeah. So I do think that employee or companies need to play a really important role.
Yeah, and now's really the time for them to step up into this opportunity. But Lars, knowing you with your head and always being sort of a step ahead of the game, then you've already actually been through this with the work that you were doing with Nokia, as you alluded to in your introduction. You've supported companies in working with the outplacement to not only provide that value and positioning of the brand and leadership, with care at the front of this, as Michelle's alluded to, as being, really important for brands and companies today, but also taking the lean of innovation and helping people kind of reskill through that process, haven't you? Would you like to share some of your insights there as to the experience with Nokia?
Yeah, without making the story too long. So Nokia hit a wall of disruption from the surroundings, which meant that the company radically changed. And you could also argue that when you lay off people in entire facilities, like in Copenhagen, we fired everybody. So it's 1,500 people that is in a 1.5 year ramp down, and everybody's in the same boat. That is radically different than, for instance, shaving off 10-20% of resource staff. But what was done with Nokia was that we made an offer to people to start their own company. They could have a package of coaching, financial support. They could even pull out patents from Nokia if that made sense. All based on a business plan, an idea, a plan to go into a startup mode. The interesting part maybe was it was actually a little bit meant as a motivational gimmick to make people work hard all the way to the end. Some people had to work still 18, 24 months on deliveries already scheduled before the termination came. But eventually we just saw how the initiative changed character, and a lot of people kind of on a softer level came back and regained the energy and the passion. And you also have to understand that in a company where in our site, the 1,500 people had 10 years average seniority across the 1,500, right? There is not a single person there that have considered to create their own company for the last many years. And they do what they do, and they are all in their mid-30s to their mid-40s. And for these people, it was just an amazing opportunity to reinvent themselves, like the company should have done maybe. And like we today work with companies to do, to reinvent themselves. And during that period of time, I think that was for me the biggest motivation. That was to see the spark coming back in people's eyes again, and they built their own stuff, and really leading me to what we preach today, that you cannot buy innovation. Innovation is a mindset. Innovation is a collection of many things, but it's kind of starts and stops with your talent. And here is one method and one approach to integrate innovation in everyday life by teaching the employees a new tool set, a new mindset, and let them engage with that.
And I think that's so interesting, you know, the kind of all of the positive benefits that you've been able to allude to. And I know there's also sort of been, you know, significant ROI, return on investment from a monetary perspective as well for Nokia. But it's also quite common, and, you know, the stats kind of average around 25% of innovation activity often sort of closes down or is drawn back. You know, the organizations don't think about prioritizing innovation in this type of downturn environment. And so I just wondered, you know, Raja, to, you know, the experience that you've had over the last 5 or so years, looking at advanced trends, looking at changing markets, you know, as you quite rightly identified a huge opportunity in Dubai within the FinTech Center a number of years ago. You know, how are you kind of seeing this play out within the landscape of the skills change, but also the fact that organizations, you know, really shouldn't be, you know, pushing back on their innovation activities, but perhaps, like in the case of Nokia, using that as an opportunity to drive growth?
Absolutely. So 3 years ago, when we launched the FinTech Hive at the very early days of the financial innovation, we've had this conversation with a lot of corporates talking about how innovation and technology is actually transforming all sectors, including financial services. And as part of this transformation comes technology and people. And people will definitely have to evolve, because if the machine can replace most of the basic jobs that you do right now, you need to upskill the talent to be able to take on more complex roles and more innovative roles. Workforce upskilling has become a top priority for many organizations, with it being more challenging and competitive than ever to recruit top talent to fill in the skill gaps. Companies can use upskilling to ramp up the skills of current employees. And it's really important because job roles are shifting faster than ever. Employees expect growth opportunities. It can boost performance, morale, and motivation. It helps organizations remain competitive. But with a pandemic, like the one we've gone through, we're lucky to be able to leverage on the technology innovation that we've had to have all the access to all the resources all over the world. So we become more competitive now. I can hire top talent from anywhere in the world, not necessarily based here in Dubai, to do these jobs. And I am removing a basic layer of the workforce that became naturally redundant. But the opportunity here is to remain committed to this talent. The opportunity is to upskill this talent, enable them to access the tools that will keep them relevant, I would say, and would enable technology transformation and access to new segments within the sector that can be achieved through these reskilling programs for the employees.
I absolutely love that you touched on the fact that this is, a continuum. I think the opportunity for us to kind of look at how we're reskilling the workforce today isn't then going to be sort of like, oh, job done, we've done that now. I think this is us moving into a new way of looking at work and automation, and the pandemic has sort of accelerated this for industries and companies and supply chains, absolutely. And so with this in mind, the fact that this is going to now be a continuum way of working, hopefully, for organizations, looking at how they upskill and reskill their talent, then where do you think the responsibility lies? Do you think it lies within the individual, the person who's in a role, looking at how they should be reskilling themselves, or do you think it's something that should come from sort of top down and be leadership driven?
From my point of view, I would say both. I have used most of my time in 2020 because of the opportunity to learn new skills. I've done a couple of programs online. At the same time, my organization was also committed to provide me with opportunities to gain more skills. And I believe within the DIFC context, and I remember discussing the Aspire program with the CEO, he thought that it was a great opportunity to upskill the existing talent, because the way technology is transforming the businesses is really entrepreneurial. And this is a new culture. It's not very new to the people that probably are listening to us, but if you go to financial institutions or incumbent institutions that have been working in a very routine way and in a very structured way, they're not comfortable with innovative, challenging ideas. So you need to change that mindset. It's a culture, it's a mindset. So it's a commitment from both. The organizations should enable the opportunity, the corporates should enable the opportunity for their workforce to access these talents, but at the same time, the talent needs to understand that they need to remain competitive and they need to be as effective as possible. And they need to find the tools themselves that will complement what's offered by their organizations or on their own to remain competitive in the workforce as it's changing dramatically. I mean, you can get kids to develop websites for you now. What happens to the designers and the developers? So it's really important from both sides to really look at it.
Yeah, fantastic. And Michelle, from your experience of working with people, sort of guiding them through their journey within an organization, I suppose you've also seen it from, the employee's perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, I do agree with Raj that it's a two-way system. And I think companies have been very vocal about you've got to take responsibility for your own development. The challenge for me a little bit is we have an obligation as organizations to also support and ensure people see what's happening. Often, you're so ingrained in your own little world that you're not looking outside. And I think there is an obligation that companies have to actually provide more facilities, more awareness for organizations.
Yeah, fantastic.
Sorry, I think I've bombed out there again.
No, you're with us.
I do think organizations have a responsibility. Absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Fantastic. No, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is sort of a responsibility that's no longer about looking progression necessarily in terms of, you know, the corporate ladder, or, you know, the progression through sort of traditional ways for talent, but being able to open them to new skills and things like that.
Very much so. And I know, you know, we can talk about the 30-year-olds, but there's also another group that's a bit older that haven't necessarily got the capabilities for the future. And that's where perhaps this program could really, really be valuable.
Yeah, fantastic.
I take that as a personal hint, Michelle, even older than 30 years. Got it.
Well, I'm a little older than 30.
Yes. No, I just wanted to add to the soup here that if we look to US, of course, there's many things we don't want to copy, but getting stuff done and the work mode, there is interesting things to look at. And I mean, we get close to 1/3 of the total workforce as freelancers, which means we are past that discussion. Is it the company's responsibility, or is it the personal responsibility? Because the persons take that in their own hands, and they take their own development in their own hands, and how much they want to earn. They control their work-life balance by becoming freelancers and jumping on projects rather than jumping on one company. I think, as I mentioned, when we closed down our chapter of Nokia, we had 10 years average seniority, and you just don't see that anymore. From a startup perspective, that's also something that we work with every day, the flexibility and mobility of the high-end talent. So the real subject matter experts and the real, the top resources, they just have that choice that they can look at the work going forward a little bit, maybe as projects more than a steady employment. And for me, it feels almost like what happens in the health industry, where technology is so far in front of regulatory, and everybody wants to be a CEO of their own health, right? But what happens in the work industry is just that everybody wants to be in control of their own faith and career and work life. And the pandemic have for sure boosted that. I met a very interesting guy that was stuck on a Greek island and running as the CEO of a big teleoperator company in this region, and he found out that he could. He could run his big company from a Greek island on the phone and on calls. So this awareness, also that we can physically be anywhere, that's a major impact.
Yeah, no, that's incredible, isn't it? It can be life-changing for people, I think, in companies. And then if we just to turn this a wee bit for the last couple of moments to kind of now reflect internally and for organizations, and the opportunity for them to, you know, empower and engage, as we've talked about, their talent, you know, to unlock new revenue streams, new innovation, new ways of working. You know, I just wanted to leave that as the kind of final question from me, really, to the panel, as to, you know, how you're seeing this play out at the moment. Is it playing out at the moment, or are people talking about it and maybe thinking about how they can make that happen, you know, using this opportunity to reskill people to unlock new value for organizations? Is sort of what I'm posing to you all. Is this a reality, or are people talking a good game, or what are we seeing?
Actually, I think it's a reality from the conversations that I've had with a few organizations. I know that these organizations are looking on for tools to upskill and reskill and engage employees, even now that digital employment opportunities are available and not everybody needs to be physically in the office. How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them relevant? But I think it's really important to build an effective upskilling strategy from an organizational perspective. Each organization needs to determine the knowledge gap of that particular organization, and to think both short and long term. What is it that I want to achieve in terms of 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years, and how can I achieve that? And can I do this internally? Do I partner with providers? What is the most relevant tool that is out there that's probably part of an ecosystem that will give me much more than just the tools and skills and knowledge. And then build the training programs that make sense for the organization and for the employees of those organizations. And at the same time, understand each employee's goals and tailor plans for each individuals, because as we've heard in the Nokia example, what I understood that these individuals actually came back with relevant innovations for Nokia, and that's where you capitalize on the institutional experience that is with that remains with these individuals to come back. And looking at Dubai for a moment here, I think that we have, with the support of the government, we've built an ecosystem for entrepreneurship and businesses, e-commerce, whether it's fintech and tech-based businesses, to launch from here. You look at the regulatory framework is available, the legal infrastructure is available. I believe the DIFC has also launched special licenses for departing talents to start on their own from within the DIFC, because eventually when you come to Dubai, you just stay in Dubai, right, Lars? And you know, it becomes home for a lot of people. And how can you leverage on that institutional experience, access to technology, and to an ecosystem that will provide licensing and investing to launch something from here? And I think that's really important for organizations to keep in mind, and also to keep the employees engaged with them, because when they come back with a model to transform or disrupt that organization, they want to know about it first.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant insight. Absolutely. Michelle, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I must just say that I think not all organizations are on the same track. I think they're starting slowly. I think the pandemic has been a wake-up call. I look at the current organization I'm in, and we're nowhere near working in this way. It's moving, but there hasn't been a good plan. I mean, I think the fintechs and the Nokias,
perhaps a step ahead, Michelle, and then compared to some of the other sort of other organizations.
I think so. I think the fintechs and companies are much further ahead than some of the bigger FMCG-based companies that I've worked in. I think the discussion is there, it's starting, but it's a journey.
Fantastic. Excellent. And Lars, do you have anything finally that you would like to add to that before we open to our attendees for their questions?
I just want to say that, of course, Michelle touched on a very interesting topic. What can the big corporates learn from startups? And that's eventually what this kind of program could contribute, right? And the fact that most startups have to attract the absolute top talent without money means that you need to experiment and explore new ways and new ways of work together, and give personalized both incentives and motivation, which definitely is something we could learn from in the bigger companies.
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. Well, I think we've covered off an awful lot, a lot here around, how we can be supporting our talent while they're coming in the journey of working within an organization, and importantly, when they're departing and having the skills to be able to set up something on their own, but also to look at how we can be reskilling and upskilling, and the fact that, from what I've taken from our discussion, the responsibility really lies on both sides. The company, as Raja quite rightly discussed, needs to have the leadership and the strategic vision to be able to drive this opportunity of upskilling and reskilling their talent so that they can survive for the future. But also, I think as employees within businesses, people also need to take some ownership of that, recognize the change and this kind of incredible acceleration that we've seen of the market. So we have got a couple of really great questions that are coming through, so please do fire those over through the chat system, and I'll open with this first question. So, are there implications for businesses depending on their makeup? For example, more labour-based, or are there different strategies, or is it even important for labour-based organisations? I'm presuming, to consider this opportunity of upskilling and reskilling? And where do you start? Which I think is a great question. So who would like to take a first hit at that one? Implications for organizations based on their different makeup. So whether, I suppose, you're labor-based or technology-based. Michelle, have you seen?
Well, I think, I was going to say, from a labor-based perspective, very labor-intensive environments are challenged these days because everything is a cost. And so they are looking at technology. And I think that's where there is an obligation to look at how do you upskill a very heavy labor-based environment. And it may not be, maybe it's not within your organization because technology is driving a lot of labor. So I think it's impacting all stratas of business, labor-intensive labor, and obviously more high-tech.
And as these
where do you start? I think it depends on the organizations, right?
Yeah, the where do you start is a great big question. That's excellent. But I think also to add my thoughts on the labor model of organization, I think this is also where supporting that talent to look at other opportunities that they could be reskilling themselves can be really important. So it might be that within the organization you're discussing and strategizing around how you're going to automate the different pillars of the business. But this is where this leadership with care opportunity comes in, that then for those people who you're going to be eventually replacing, what other opportunities might there be for them and how could they reskill to continue to be relevant in the future?
Exactly.
So where do you start as an organization? Lars, do you want to kick off and take that one to begin with?
That's of course a good question, and it depends a little bit on what you're doing. But I mean, if we simply stay with our perspective, that what we do every day is help corporates move into adjacent or transitional areas to eventually renew themselves and make sure that they are also alive 10 years from now. So that's kind of our focus area. And from that perspective, there is just a couple of baseline things that is the whole organization aware that needs to happen eventually. It was not the case back in Nokia. I can assure you that everybody of those guys with the 10 years seniority, they believed that Nokia would stand forever. And to such an extent that we were so sure that we had the leading edge technologies and the roadmap in place that we don't even have to ask the outside world. We are driving this until we hit the wall and goes from a top 5 brand in the world to nothing in 2-3 years. So that's the wake up call. So from my personal experience, it's great to start with a change mindset. Be ready for change. Manage to make change into something positive and continuous, rather than be something that we don't want to talk about and it hurts us a little bit. Change is natural. Change is good. We learned that the hard way.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. All right, we've got another question here, which is what sort of skills should we be upskilling our teams for to help build success? Raja, do you have any thoughts on that? What sorts of skills are you seeing?
I think it's important to look at technology skills, especially at labor-intensive organizations. What type of technologies do they need to use to be more effective on one side? And then the other side, I would say, as building on Lars' comments, it's a mindset. So the mindset being open to transformation. I like to use this word more than disruption, but then looking at entrepreneurial skills, because eventually, and looking at the existing context post-pandemic and the opportunities created by technology, there is a boom that is expected to happen in our region, specifically within the e-commerce and tech solutions. And because of the regulatory and legal infrastructure that enables it, and access to talent and access to funding, we believe that there will be a lot of tech startups coming out of this region. So it's really important to be able to think like an entrepreneur, understand how to set up a company, how to launch a product or a service online, and how to market it and take it to the consumers, how to really create new segments within the industry. So I would say technology and entrepreneurship, basically.
Yeah, fantastic. And I really like that. I think it's so important that, you know, we see entrepreneurship as a mindset, you know, and that it's a way, and it's something that you can be, you know, supported with organizations like Aspire and others that can be helping provide the tools and the skills. But if you've got that mindset, and if you're open for the transformation and open for some of these challenging discussions, then yeah, some amazing things can happen. And I think too, you know, it suits to a lot of people, it suits to the opportunity of taking the risk and stepping out and building something themselves. And if they're doing so in the way that, you know, Lars mentioned, you know, not falling into the Nokia trap, but actually going out there and talking with their customers and talking with potential customers, you know, then that can be such a rewarding and empowering and challenging journey. But also being able to look at these skills internally and continuing with the mindset and exploring opportunities so that you can continue to be relevant and explore new ways of working within your organization. So yeah, really important from sort of both lenses. So we've got a couple more questions here. Who within the business do I need to get buy-in from? Does this need to be a C-level decision and discussion? And I think it comes a wee bit back to that point of, you know, who drives it? Is it something that you should be driving for yourself as an employee within an organization, or back to the strategy? But, you know, does it have to sit at the C-suite, I suppose, is the question.
Well, I think it depends on, as the organization, what they will do to support. So if it's that they're going to support employees moving, you know, building skills, if that's money, and maybe C-suite has to make that decision, or it could be entrepreneurial leaders leading these initiatives. I think it really will depend on the organization and their appetite.
Yeah, it can do, can't it? All right, and sorry. Last question that I have here is just that here for now anyway. Oh no, we've got two more. So this main question relates to some of the fintech goals, such as economies of scale, reducing traction and service cost, improving customer experience for firms in financial services, and the effect it had and has had on the millennial demographic in terms of employment. So I'm not too sure if that's actually a question, but maybe that was some context to a further question around how people can deploy that within their business, which is quite interesting from the fintech perspective and acting at that level of scale.
Interesting question here, which I can relate to. Maybe Michelle can answer. How can HR departments support this? Because you're also challenging the HR mindset and mentality, because they have a structured program for you. You can do 2 trainings a year, then you're good. But now you're saying, you know, I need something different. How can HR departments support this?
Oh, absolutely, Raja. I think that's one of the challenges. HR need to actually start looking at what are the skills needed and how can they support entrepreneurial programs? What should they be doing differently? What are the leadership? What are the programs they're offering? I think HR in particular are looking at obviously upskilling, but are they really developing programs that do that? And I think it's either sourcing or sorry, I lost you.
You're back with us, Michelle.
Sorry, I've lost. I'm so sorry. This is so embarrassing.
You're with us now, Michelle.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I was just saying that HR has a really strong responsibility to actually understand what are the skills gaps and then design or either source in programs that will support employees. I'm not sure HR has been either engaged sufficiently in this.
So that's an opportunity, isn't it, for us to, you know,
I
for
do think
HR
so.
leaders to take forward and lead by example, hopefully.
Yep.
Make some changes. Fantastic. Excellent. So we've got a couple more moments. If anyone's got a final question they would like to pop in the Q&A box. Oh, I've had some clarification to the question I got a wee bit confused on, so thank you for that. So in your opinion, which of the above FinTech goals has the most impact on employment in the financial services? And that was the goals such as the economies of scale, reducing transaction and service costs, and improving customer experience. So Raja, perhaps one for you or Lars.
So the FinTech main goals are really to enable consumer access to services by eliminating the intermediary. This was the biggest driver of FinTech, which eventually creates economies of scale and reduces transactions and service costs. At the same time, it's also improving the customer experience and consumer journey. As we look at mobile phones penetration is huge, a very large number, and every consumer wants to access these services in a very simple, effective way. And with the mobile and smartphones that is enabling us to do that, there is more demand towards eliminating the visits to the branches and really getting your investment requirements or financial transaction requirements done on the spot in a very seamless experience. And this is why we see most of the financial institutions launching digital banks that are able to capture the consumer needs.
Yeah.
So it's across the board, I would say.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Raja. And there's just a final comment here, which I really like. And I think, Lars, that you and I have kind of lived and breathed this quite a lot, which is around, you know, instead of being competition, should the motto be cooperation between companies within the tech field? And I know with a lot of the work that we do through Startup Bootcamp, and particularly in Dubai, you know, is about bringing some of those larger organizations together to work and see what's coming out in terms of innovation and new startups, so that people can cooperate and, you know, find opportunities to collaborate together around innovation. So from my personal point of view, I think we can really stand behind that opportunity for cooperation and things. Lars, do you have anything that you'd like to sort of add to that final point?
Yeah, I think, of course, there is a mega trend of open innovation. We see tech clubs coming together, recreating expensive products coming out of traditional corporates, coming out in an almost identical look and feel and functionality at a fraction of the cost. We see other factors impact the will to spend power and energy and intellect on creating something new, which is super interesting. At the same time, we are working from a perspective that we could go very, very far on collaboration, and we spend a lot of our time on matchmaking corporates to startups where we identify specific things they could work on together. But we also have the ability to look at characteristics where we say, okay, this one you need to own. This one you should not collaborate. You should go out and compete in the market. There can be clear triggers for that. In the end of the day, corporates are here to make business, and there's different ways to do that. But I think as you said, Katie, this is what we do every day. We map the opportunities, and then we figure out where is it possible to collaborate and where do we want to compete.
Yes, brilliant, excellent. Thank you, Lars. Well, look, I think that brings us to our last kind of question here from our attendees, and I think we'll take this moment to really just thank our panelists. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Michelle, for sticking with the technology. These are the days, isn't it? You know, we're all going to end up being experts in internet connections as well as all sorts of other things through this change. But you know, I really hope that everyone has found this to be an incredibly interesting and insightful conversation, as sort of was promised at the beginning. I think this is an absolutely huge topic, and we've really kind of scratched the surface, but hopefully for all of you who are leaders within organizations looking at how you're going to be now planning for the future, how you're going to empower your talent, looking at where your organization is going to be moving from this disruption of automation, plus the challenges that the pandemic has thrown us all this year. And, you know, really looking at the opportunities of how you're going to reskill, outskill and upskill your talent need to be sort of at the forefront, I think, of everyone's mind. And, you know, that's, as I said right at the start, that's something we're incredibly passionate about with Aspire. So following the session today, we will be sending out some further information on the Aspire program, how we're working with large organizations and individuals to help them through these times, look at the opportunities of upskilling. And, you know, if you'd like to book some time to discuss it with us further, we'd really welcome that, to have a discussion about how this program can in particular help you on your journey to this. So I think that draws us to a close, unless any of the panelists have a final comment they would like to make, or we've covered a lot, haven't we? So it's been absolutely fantastic. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of you who joined us today. And for those of you who submitted your questions, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and take care.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Lars and Michelle.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Sorry about the internet.
No worries. No problem. Bye-bye.
Bye.